Hi, I'm Jeremy Scott and welcome to the Jeremy Scott Spiritual Podcast, the podcast that takes a no-frills approach to all things spiritual. Hi guys, how you doing? Great to be with you once again. And what I'm going to be looking at today is Akashic Records. Are they real? Do they really exist? Are they what we believe they are to be? I mean, when you look at it, first of all, what do we view Akashic Records to be? For the most part, and this is just like a general view, general overview, we view the Akashic Records as like a monumental universal library, where every single piece of information available or even unavailable to us is there. Not only to us as humans in form or in spirit, but perhaps also others from other worlds, other dimensions, other universes, whatever. There could be more than one branch of the Akashic Records, one for each universe. That's how we view it. You know, it's like a source, an information source, an info center. A bit like when we go to a new town or a new city, we go to the information center to find out what's on, what's happening. Tourist information center. It's a bit like that in a sense. Has all the info that you need about where you are in life, where you're going, what's happened before, and all those kinds of things. And it's supposed to be that every single thing we've ever done, said, and so on is recorded there. Everything we've experienced through, not only in this particular life experience we're going through, but from all other life experiences we've ever gone through as well. So you've got the karmic angle in that way. And excuse me if you hear any like wind noise. It's a bit blowy today, a bit blustery. I thought it would be a bit more sheltered here, but keeps buffeting me at certain spots as I walk through this graveyard once again. And obviously there's a couple of contractors here that seem to be doing some kind of work, so making some noise in the background just as I started recording. That's what you call Murphy's Law in that sense. So anyway, where did we get this notion of Akashic Records? And some will say, oh, you know, that's what the ancients used to tap into. They knew that from a shamanic age. They knew that from eons ago, you know, to tap into this wealth of knowledge. Well, actually, no. The Akashic Records are only about 100 to 150 years old. The notion of it. It started in the late 1800s. There's a lady called Helen, and I may get this name wrong, Blavatsky, something like that. She started the notion off, and she's attributed to starting the notion off by talking about indestructible tablets where all this information, all human information, was written upon or engraved for all time. Maybe that's where we also got the idea of the emerald tablets. Now, because many people attribute them to being in Atlantis and Lemuria and things like that. However, there's been, I do remember listening to a podcast a couple of years ago that, because somebody had written a book about it and said, no, actually the emerald tablets don't exist and never have done. It was just thought up by someone. And that idea perpetuated. But I don't know, don't quote me on that. But there is that possibility that indeed did happen. But anyway, this lady called Helen, she didn't mention you know, the term Akashic. But if we look at that word, Akasa is Sanskrit for sky, for atmosphere. Perhaps universe, you could take it as universe, or the ether. You know, so that Akashic came much later. That didn't come into being until the sort of early 1900s through a guy called, just trying to get the name right, Rudolf Steiner, I think his name, Randolph Steiner. And he mentioned it, brought it up in a couple of his books that he wrote at the time, and a couple of lectures that he did a bit later on. He included the term and talked about the Akashic Records, and also claimed that he could access these records as well. And he was very much focused on Atlantis and Lemuria. All this has come from what they call theosophy. It's a philosophic approach. It's a philosophic, get my teeth back in again, philosophic discussion. Theo being theology, obviously, and then osophy is like the discussion part. So it's all to do with discussions that they had. They formed a society called a Theosophy Society. And Steiner also went on, because he fell out with them or whatever, he went on and formed his own sort of foundational society called Anthroposophy. It's another big mouthful. They loved the big words back then. Weird and wonderful words. Yeah, so he brought it up in his discussions, and then later on Edgar Casey, you know, was discussing it and talking about it, and he talks about other things, I think also the Emerald Tablets and things like that. And he also claimed to be able to access the Akashic Records. But are they real? Do they really exist? And like I said, we view them as a huge library where we could go in and anytime we want, you know, and access any piece of information we want. But obviously for us to do that, we have to do it through meditation. We can't just walk in. It's not like a physical library, you know, where we can just walk in and pull a few books off the shelves and sit down and read them for a while. In fact, talking of that, that's what I used to do as a kid. You know, as a young lad, not long after I learned to read and so on, I used to go to my local library, which was in Belfast. It was a Belfast city centre library. Huge, imposing building, Georgian or Victorian style, you know, big, huge granite blocks. Yeah, and wow, really old inside, old looking. Yeah, and there's 2 or 3 floors full of books, bookcases full of books. I used to love that. I used to go there and read all kinds of books, obviously starting off with the children's books, comic style books, because you had things like Tintin, Dr. Seuss, and what you call annuals. These are like yearly hardback books made up of comic books, like, you know, the Beano, the Dandy. You may have different ones in your area, and there'd be the whole year's production be put into an annual form, plus a few extra bits and pieces, and they'd be sold like once a year or something like that, you know. I used to read all them, and then later on, obviously, normal books, children's books, you know, getting into the older versions and start reading about, I think it's there that I started reading about The Hobbit and getting into The Lord of the Rings. And I remember also reading a series of books about a guy, a young lad called Billy. I'm pretty sure his name was Billy, and he could do all kinds of things through the power of his mind. You know, he had telekinesis, telepathy, and, you know, he could make things disappear, and all. He had what you would call magical powers, but it was all supernatural powers, if you like. You know, it's at great times. So I can envision the Akashic Records being like such a place like that, where you'd go in and be wall to wall books, floor to ceiling books, you know, and everything's there. But can we just go there to access anything we want. Can we access it at all? I have spoken to my guides about this, and the information I get is that it does exist. The Akashic Records kind of exists, but it's more of a personal nature. It's something personal for you. It's not like a general public library. It's only for you. You can access your information, but you're not able to access anybody else's information. It's a bit like, you can access your personal medical records, but you can't access the records of anybody else. That's fair, isn't it? So anything relevant to you, you can access. You can go in there and you can delve in, or at least ask the question and receive the answers in that way. It's, if you want to, you could, for those of you who can really visualize really, really well, you can visualize yourself going into the library and, in that sense, like a universal library, and asking the librarian, you'd like some information on this, that or other, and you can imagine, visualize sitting down, reading it or receiving that information in whatever form you want. For those of us who have difficulty in visualizing in that way, the best way is just to meditate on it and ask the question. And that information will come to you through your guides. And that's how I access the Akashic Records in that sense, by asking a question or asking for direction, asking for information about a certain topic or anything like that. Anything that's relevant and personal to me, anything I need to know for my highest and greatest good, and I'll get answers. So it's a case of trusting your guides, it's a case of trusting your intuition, listening out with awareness, mindfulness, being sitting still and being aware of your moment, which is now, and accessing the information in that way. The way it's portrayed, you get these ones who say they can go to the Akashic Records for you and get information for you that you want to know about, or they take you on meditations where you're going into like a huge building or some kind of temple-like structure and things like that. Well, maybe not. Jury's out on that one. I would think anyone who says they can access the information on your behalf would be more like a channeler or a medium in that sense, because if they're accessing information which is relevant to you and which is accurate, that's pretty much what a medium does, or even a tarot reader, because that's another way of accessing the Akashic Records, is through tarot reading. If you can do personal readings for yourself, you'd be able to do that. Not everybody can. Some find it very difficult to read for themselves. They can't take themselves out of the picture, so to speak. They can't be as objective as they would need to be. They don't treat themselves, or find it difficult to treat themselves as a client. They get too involved. I do read for myself, I've always have done, and I'm able to mentally step back and treat myself as a client. And yes, I do get involved because I know I can see the information that's coming up, but I'll also ask questions just to clarify whatever information I'm receiving, to make sure that it is as I'm interpreting it, and also to make sure that I am being objective, to make sure that I'm not just adding bits and pieces because I think it's going to go this way. Oh, this is the outcome I want to happen. Oh, that must be it. It says there, yeah, so that must be the outcome I'm expecting, and then those expectations could get dashed when it doesn't happen. That's why so many people tarot readers find it very difficult to read for themselves, so they prefer to go to others who can do the readings on their behalf, and that's fair. If you're able to read for yourself, that's brilliant. If not, then suggest you go to someone you trust who's a good tarot reader, who's accurate, who has a good reputation in that way, or even a medium. Be the same kind of thing. You'll get the same kind of information. Because the Akashic Records, there's another lady, I think her name's Mary something, name escapes me now, but there was another lady who wrote a book, I think it was in the 1930s, or around about that time, and she was saying that the Akashic Records, this is where I guess our notion of Akashic Records comes from, in that way, along with Edgar Cayce promoting it as well, that it was a record of every single living thing on this planet. They didn't look at things back then in universal terms as a universal Akashic record. They were only focusing on this planet, this university of life, as I like to call it. So they were only concerned about what happened here. They weren't bothered about beyond. They weren't bothered about alien species or other life forms elsewhere and things like that. They were only concerned back then, in the early part of the 20th century, late 19th and early 20th century, they were only bothered about here. So she was saying, she didn't say it herself, she quoted it from another source, which dated back to the 1800s again. She quoted from a source that talked about the Akashic Records being a record of every single action, thought, speech or word spoken or action taken, whatever, from every single living being, whether human or animal or plant. Every single human being was recorded in the Akashic Records. That was the thought back then. Over time, it's become more popularized. I think especially when the start of the New Age movement, it became something that was very popular, and that's where these ideas of it being a bit more universal, not just Earth-centric, as I like to call it, but also a bit more universal in that sense. It goes a bit broader than that. I've tried to ask questions about certain things with the universe, and I've never really got satisfactory answers. So there's some things that we are perhaps not meant to know, or at least not as yet. So it's not that the answers aren't there, it's just that we're not meant to have them just yet. We're not ready for it. But there is a lot of things about the universe that we do know. Certainly if you look at what the cosmologists are finding out, and the astronomers and so on are finding out, all these new telescopes and exploration that they're doing, that is pretty much coming from the Akashic Records, in the sense of when they are doing their interpretation, they're getting their insights in their way that they can understand them. So they are being guided to how the universe got started. I think I remember, did I mention it? There's a lady called Jude Currivan. So Jude Currivan, Currivan, and she's written a book called The Story of Gaia. She's a cosmologist, she's a physicist, but she's also very spiritual. So she's mixing her spirituality with science, and she gives a blow-by-blow account of how Gaia was brought into being, or how the universe was brought into being. She doesn't call it the Big Bang, she calls it the breath. So whatever creator that we have, whoever was the originator of everything, the source of all that we see, purvey, and more, it came into being as a breath, rather than a big explosion. But she puts it in very scientific terms, but also in a way that we can understand it, if you know what I mean. So lay people like ourselves, if we're not of a scientific nature, we don't get too confused. But at the same time, her book is a scientific reference book. She's got loads of references and that she can turn to so that her peers can look at it and read it and comment on it, and she's got some good reviews on it. You know, so it's worth getting. The Story of Gaia, Jude Curryvan. I haven't finished it yet, I'm still working my way through it, but it's very, very interesting. But that kind of information comes from downloads. Your downloads that you get, your insights that you get, that's coming from the Akashic Records. That's my personal opinion, that's how I view it. So when you're accessing Akashic Records through meditation, you get these downloads. Or even when you're not meditating, you might just be thinking about a certain thing and then suddenly get that boom, flash of insight. You know how it happens. I'm sure you've experienced it. You could be thinking about, you know, I don't know. Let me think of a more recent one. Yeah, when I was considering the Akashic Records, I got that flash of information that it's all personal. We can't access the records of anyone else or any other being. We can only access those records that are relevant to us at this time, whether it's from our past or whether it's going forward. However, we can't at the same time looking at going forward, we're not going to be able to access, you know, dates and times and things. When are we going to pass? When are we going back to the spirit world? These things, kind of things. No, they're going to be kept away from us. That'd be like, the way I'd view that would be like if you order a book that's not published yet, you pre-order it. You don't know what's going to be in that book until it's actually published. So that information from the future nows, the future moments of our lives, is not available to us, not all of it anyway, until it's ready to be published. You know, such as, you know, the significant side of things, more the, you know, are we going to meet a special person at what time, what date, where, and all that? Are we going to pass on? We're going to finish our life experience. You may get a general answer, as in, you've pre-ordered the book, you know it's coming out. You may get a snapshot of it, you know, but you don't get the details. So in the same way, your guides, angels, whatever you want to turn to, you want to use, they will tell you certain things about your time to come, your future if you like, but they won't tell you any great details until the time is ready for you to handle that, to deal with that, until it's much closer to the time, or until that has been published. You know, that book has been published, so to speak, and you're ready for it. Anything in your past you should be able to access, and that's where I suppose past life regressions come in handy for those, you know, who can work with that, who can get their information in that way. I find it difficult sometimes with past lives. Any ones I've done either for myself or being guided through, I get limited information, if I'm being honest, but as far as I'm aware, that is something to do with me. That's something to do about releasing control. So I've got maybe trust issues and things I've still to work on. Yeah, so rambling a little bit, but the Akashic Records, do they exist? I would say yes. However, perhaps not in the way that is portrayed by popular culture today. So guys, there we have it. If you've got any questions about that, let me know. Let's have a chat in the comments. Yeah, let's interact. Give me some feedback on this. Was this of use to you? Did you find it useful? I'll probably add a poll and a question you can answer as well to this. If you're on Spotify, you can take part in that. And I look forward to having another chat about another weighty topic at some time in the very future now. Cheers guys, until next time, namaste.